My name is Augustus, and right now, the two most important things in my life, my daughter Alicia, who's 10, and my son Caleb, who's 3, I'm fighting to keep them. That fight is in court, against the people I used to call family. And it all started on what was supposed to be the best night of my life. You know, it's crazy how fast things can fall apart. One day you're living the life you always dreamed of, a good job, a house that feels like a home, a woman that makes you feel like the luckiest person alive, 2 kids that call you dad, everything lined up perfectly. And then, just like that, it's all gone. I'm Augustus, and I want to tell you my story, not because I need sympathy, but because what happened to me after losing my wife, the way people turned on me, tried to take everything I had left, I think a lot of you are going to understand what that kind of pain feels like. So sit with me for a little while. And if you're someone who's into real stories, stories about loss, about being blamed for things beyond your control, about holding on when everything falls apart, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if this video speaks to you, drop a like. It really does help. All right, let me start from the beginning. I met Helena when I was 24 years old. She was working at a little coffee shop near the office where I was doing an internship. I walked in on a Tuesday morning, barely awake, just trying to get through the day, and she was behind the counter, laughing at something a coworker said. That kind of laugh that fills up a whole room. I forgot what I was going to order. She looked at me and said, "You good?" And I remember thinking, no, I am absolutely not okay, but not in a bad way. We talked for maybe 3 minutes that day, but I went back the next day and the day after that, and eventually I stopped pretending I was going for the coffee. We dated for 2 years before I asked her to marry me. And I want to be honest with you, I was terrified when I proposed. Not because I had any doubt, but because she was so far out of my league that I genuinely wasn't sure she was going to say yes. She said yes. We got married the following spring. Small ceremony, mostly family, some close friends. And I remember standing at the end of that aisle watching her walk toward me thinking, this is it. This is the part of life I was always moving toward. The years after that were good, really good. I had a solid job in logistics management, the kind of job that's not glamorous but pays well and gives you stability. Helena worked part-time as an accountant, mostly from home after Alicia was born. We had a system. We had a rhythm. Yeah, we had arguments. Of course we did. Every couple does. Sometimes it was about money, sometimes about how to handle the kids, sometimes about nothing that made sense the day after, but nothing serious, nothing that made me worry about us. We always came back to each other. That was something Helena used to say. We always come back to each other. 15 years, 2 kids, a house with a yard big enough that Caleb could run in circles until he fell down laughing. Alicia growing up into this sharp, curious little girl who asked more questions than most adults I knew. That was my life. That was everything I had built. Now, our 15th wedding anniversary was something I'd been planning for months. 15 years is what people call a crystal anniversary, bodas de cristal, clear, solid, something that reflects light back at you. I thought about that a lot when I was planning the trip. 15 years of something clear between me and Helena, something we could both see through, see each other through. I booked a place a few hours from home, a small inn up in the hills, nice restaurant, a trail that led to a view Helena had always wanted to see. Nothing crazy extravagant, just us, just quiet, just 2 nights away from the noise of everyday life. We left the kids with Helena's parents, her mom and dad, Mrs. Rosa and Mrs. Paolo. Helena's parents were, look, they were decent people, but they had their opinions. They always thought Helena could have done better than me. Not in a cruel way, but in that quiet way that certain families have. You feel it in how they look at you during the holidays, how they ask about your job with a little too much curiosity, like they're checking to see if you're still keeping up. But they loved their grandkids, no question about that. So we dropped Alicia and Caleb off on a Friday evening. Helena's mom made them dinner. Caleb held on to Helena's leg for about 5 minutes before running back inside for dessert. Alicia gave me a hug and told me not to forget to bring her something. I promised I would. Now, this is where I need you to really listen. Helena's parents had suggested we travel during the day. Leave Friday morning, arrive early afternoon, have the whole evening to settle in. Makes sense, right? Avoid night driving, take it easy. But we didn't. We left Friday night instead. And I want to be careful about how I explain this because I've had to explain it so many times since, to police, to lawyers, to a judge. Helena and I made that decision together. She wanted to watch the sunset on the road. She had this thing about golden hour on the highway, said it looked like the whole world was made of honey. I thought that was a beautiful reason to leave late. So we left around 7 p.m. It was a clear night, no rain, I wasn't tired, I hadn't been drinking. We were just driving, talking, listening to music. Helena had her feet up on the dash, something she always did that drove me crazy. I told her to put her feet down. She laughed and put them down, and that was the last normal thing that happened. I don't remember the impact itself. What I remember is the sound, a kind of loudness that doesn't feel like sound, more like pressure. And then stillness. And then the smell of something burning. The other driver had run a red light at high speed. He crossed into our lane. There was nothing I could have done. The investigators confirmed that. The police report confirmed that. The man himself, who survived with injuries, confirmed that. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't Helena's fault. It was just one of those things that life does sometimes. Sudden, without warning, without mercy. Helena died at the scene. I was in the hospital for 12 days with a broken arm, 2 cracked ribs, and a gash along my left shoulder that needed 32 stitches. I remember counting the stitches in the mirror the first time I was allowed to stand up. 32, like I needed the number to make it feel real. And while I was lying in that hospital bed, I kept waiting for the moment when I would fully understand what had happened, when it would land in me completely. It never really did. That kind of grief doesn't land all at once. It comes in pieces, slowly, for a very long time. Mrs. Rosa and Mrs. Paulo came to the hospital. And I want to be fair here. In those first days, they were devastated. Of course they were. They had just lost their daughter. I understood that. I didn't expect them to be strong for me. I didn't need that from them. But somewhere in that grief, somewhere in the pain of what they were going through, something shifted. Senora Rosa said it first, quietly, on the 3rd day. I was half asleep when she said it. She didn't know I could hear. They should have left in the morning. I told them to leave in the morning. And there it was. That one sentence. That's where it started. Life is not easy. Life is not easy. And sometimes it takes from you the one thing that was keeping you standing. I know that feeling. But here's what I wasn't ready for. Grief can make people cruel. Not intentionally, sometimes, but grief that has no place to go, it turns into blame, and blame needs somewhere to land. I became the place it landed. By the time I was discharged from the hospital, the tone had already changed. Mrs. Rosa barely looked at me. Helena's younger sister stopped answering my messages, and I started hearing things, through mutual friends, through neighbors, that Mrs. Rosa had been telling people that I had insisted on traveling at night, that I hadn't listened, that if I had just done what they asked, Helena would still be alive. I want to pause here and say something clearly. I understand why they felt that way. I do. Grief distorts things. It makes you look for a reason because a world without reasons is more terrifying than a world with blame. But understanding why someone does something doesn't make it hurt less. And what happened next, that's when it went beyond grief, beyond blame. That's when they went to court. About 2 months after the accident, I received paperwork. Mrs. Rosa and Mrs. Paulo were filing for custody of Alicia and Caleb. The argument they made, and I have to give them credit, they found a lawyer who knew how to frame it, was that I was emotionally unstable, that I had shown poor judgment on the night of the accident, and that they could provide a more stable home for the children. Emotionally unstable. I sat with that for a long time. I was grieving. I was healing from physical injuries. I was trying to figure out how to tell a 10-year-old that her mother was not coming home. I was waking up in the middle of the night to check on a 3-year-old who kept asking where mommy was. I was doing all of that alone. And yes, maybe I wasn't perfect. Maybe there were days I sat in the kitchen staring at nothing for too long. Maybe there were nights I cried in the bathroom so the kids wouldn't hear me. But unstable? Unfit? I was a father, a grieving father. That's not a disqualification. The legal process was one of the hardest things I've ever been through, and I say that as someone who had already been through the hardest thing. Look, you have to understand what it's like to sit in a room and have people tell a judge that you shouldn't be allowed to raise your own children. People who came to your house for Christmas, people whose grandkids you drove to school, people who, until 5 months ago, called you family. My lawyer was a woman named Dr. Carla. Calm, direct, the kind of person who doesn't tell you everything is going to be okay because she respects you too much to make that promise. She told me to document everything, every appointment, every school meeting, every diaper change, every bedtime story. She told me to get character witnesses, friends, teachers, my boss. And slowly the picture started to shape up in court. Caleb's pediatrician testified that the boy was healthy, well cared for, and showed no signs of neglect. Alicia's teacher testified that she was present in school, emotionally supported, and had been gently guided through the grieving process with her father's full involvement. A family therapist who had been working with both kids said removing them from their father's home would cause more harm than the home environment ever could. The police report, the accident reconstruction, the statements from the other driver and witnesses, all of it pointed to one clear conclusion. I had not caused that accident. I had not made a reckless decision. I had driven my wife to a place she wanted to go on a night we both chose, and someone else had taken her from me. It took 8 months. 8 months of proceedings, hearings, evaluations, home visits, character witnesses. And then the judge ruled. Custody of Alicia and Caleb granted to me, their father. I'm not going to pretend I celebrated. I sat in the parking lot of the courthouse, and I just breathed for a long time. Not because I had won, because the whole fight felt like a war I never should have had to fight. But here's what I really want you to hear. When it was over, when I had the kids at home, when Alicia had started sleeping through the night again, when Caleb had stopped asking every day where mommy was and started asking about dinosaurs again, I made a decision. I did not block Dona Rosa and Signor Paolo from the kids. I know what you're thinking, and believe me, I had reasons, real reasons. I was angry. I had been through hell because of what they did. I sat in rooms where people tried to take my children from me, and those people were her parents. But people don't always have empathy. Not everyone shows kindness when they're hurting, and what they did came from pain, real pain. Losing a child is something I can't even imagine. I lost a wife, but losing your child, that's a different kind of damage. And more than anything, Alicia remembers her grandmother's cookies. Caleb lights up when he hears Signor Paolo's voice. They are pieces of Helena. They carry her in ways I never could. So I called Mrs. Rosa. It was a short call, uncomfortable, full of long pauses. But I told her, you can see the kids. I'm not going to be the person who uses them as weapons. I'm not going to let my children lose both their mother and their grandparents because of what happened between us. She cried. I didn't say much else after that. I didn't need to. I want to close this the way it deserves to be closed. This story isn't really about a custody battle. It's about what loss does to people. It's about the way grief can make you look for someone to carry the weight of your pain. And it's about what happens when you decide in the middle of all of that not to become the thing that hurt you. I am not a perfect man. I never claimed to be. But I am a father.
And my kids are growing up knowing that their dad loved their mom, that their grandparents loved their mom, and that even when everything fell apart, the people around them tried to hold on. That's what Helena would have wanted. I know that like I know my own name. And that's enough for me to keep going.